If it weren't for your social security check, we wouldn't even need you here. That's what Michael, my own son, told me. The same one who once slept on my chest with fingers so small they looked like flower petals. The same one who would cry if I walked a few steps away at the park. The same one who, years ago, would call for his mommy when he fell and scraped his knee. That night, he didn't even look me in the eye. He said it while standing on the other side of the kitchen, scrolling through his phone, as if it were an objective truth, an emotionless fact, a mathematical equation. I was equivalent to an income, a monthly figure that kept this house afloat. Nothing more. I had a wooden spoon in my hand because I was stirring the rice to keep it from sticking. The roast was already in the oven. Brenda had mentioned she wanted roasted potatoes, so I had prepared those too. It was hot, my back ached, and I had spent the entire day cleaning and doing laundry because we were expecting company. But still, even then, I smiled when Lucy came running in from outside to hug me. She was the only reason I was still putting up with it all. After Michael said that, no one else spoke. Brenda, from the hallway, gave a tiny smile. She said nothing, but she didn't have to. She had already won. I didn't say a single word either. I finished stirring the rice, turned off the burner, and with trembling hands, I took off my apron. I didn't know if I felt anger, sadness, or a lethal mix of both. I went to the laundry room, turned on the faucet, and splashed water on my face. I had to calm down. Not in front of them, not there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the same bed that had belonged to me and Arthur, my late husband, for almost 40 years. The room that now barely felt like mine. The walls were no longer my own. My things were reduced to a single dresser and a box under the bed. The rest was used for storage. My life, compacted. I stared at the ceiling for hours. I didn't cry. I had no tears left. And as I listened to the faint hum of the ceiling fan, only one sentence crossed my mind. How did we get here? Going back to the beginning isn't easy. Sometimes you prefer not to stir up what hurts. But now I know it's necessary. 3 years ago, after Arthur died, the house felt way too big. At first, the loneliness felt like a gentle echo, a whisper that left me in peace. But as the months went by, that silence became a pit. That's why, when Michael asked for my help, I didn't hesitate for a second. Mom, Brenda lost her job. We're behind on the rent, and I don't know what to do. Come live here, I told him without thinking. There's plenty of room. They arrived one January afternoon, with Lucy holding their hands and 3 large suitcases. I had prepared the guest room, changed the sheets, and even bought a new lamp. I was happy. I had my family back. Lucy hugged me tight and whispered in my ear, "I missed you so much, Grandma. I thought everything would be okay." Over time, I began to notice little things. Brenda never looked at me directly. She was always busy, annoyed about something. At first, I attributed it to stress, the pressure of being unemployed, the adjustment. But then the comments started. "Your mother doesn't respect our space," she would tell Michael when she thought I wasn't listening. "She's always there, as if the house were only hers. And it was mine, legally, completely, documented in my name. But I didn't say it. I didn't want to cause conflict." Little by little, the house began to change. I kept cooking, cleaning, paying the bills. My check, though modest, covered the utilities and a good chunk of the groceries. Michael had found a job, but it wasn't stable. Brenda still wasn't working, though she wore new clothes every month. And yet, I began to notice that I was in the way. Or at least, that's how they made me feel. One night, Brenda asked me not to sit with them for dinner because they needed to talk as a couple. The next day, my chair was gone. They had removed it from the table. I became invisible. But I kept making breakfast, doing the shopping, taking Lucy to school when Brenda had a migraine or was too busy. I became a shadow that held up everyone's routine without anyone acknowledging it. Until one morning, Michael asked me if I could put the house in his name. He said it would be more practical for everyone, that in case of an emergency, it would be better, that things needed to be in order. I looked at him for a long time. And I did it. I went to the lawyer's office. I signed. I handed it over. I trusted him. I never thought they would hold it over my head. Just like that, a month later, my room was downsized. My private bathroom became shared. My independence was erased. I became a background figure. No one asked how I was. No one listened to me. Except for Lucy. She was still the light. Every night she would crawl into my bed, even if it annoyed Brenda. She told me about what she was learning in school. She drew me pictures of flowers. She told me she loved me very much. She was the only reason I didn't pack my things and leave, though I no longer had anywhere to go. I had given everything away. That night, after Michael's comment, I understood something. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a bad moment. It wasn't a thoughtless phrase. It was what he thought, what he felt, what he believed. And then, for the first time in years, I felt something inside me break. But not with pain, with clarity. I went to the kitchen. Everyone was asleep. I sat in front of the cold oven. I looked at the pot of rice, still warm. Then I took my old notebook, the one I used for recipes, and I wrote a single sentence. I deserve more than this. The next day I got up early. I made coffee. I combed my hair. I put on the blue dress that Arthur always said made me look like a summer sky. And I left. Without saying where I was going. Without asking for permission. It wasn't with a suitcase. It was with a purpose. I didn't walk far. I didn't have a clear destination. But my feet knew where to go. Sometimes the body acts before the mind catches up. I crossed 2 streets. I passed a bakery that still smelled of freshly baked bread. And I arrived in front of a place I hadn't visited in years. It was a modest coffee shop with hanging plants at the entrance and wrought iron chairs. A wooden sign read Frankie's Place. I hesitated for a second, but I went in. She was there, sitting behind the counter, flipping through a magazine. Her hair was up in a messy bun, and glasses were perched on the tip of her nose. She looked at me, and for a moment she frowned, as if she didn't recognize me. Then her eyes widened. "Eleanor!" she exclaimed with a smile that brought back a piece of my youth. My God, what a surprise. I didn't know what to say. My hands were shaking. Francesca Franchi had been my best friend when we were young. We were inseparable, until life took us down different paths. She chose to travel, study abroad, marry a Chilean man she later left. I stayed in the neighborhood, married Arthur, raised Michael. I was a homemaker my whole life. She lived 1,000 lives. I lived in a circle. Still, in that instant, I felt that time didn't matter. We hugged as if we had seen each other yesterday. "What are you doing here?" she asked, pouring me a coffee without even offering, as if she knew I needed it. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I just needed to get out of my house." "Then you're in the right place," she said, pointing to a table by the window. "Here, nobody rushes, nobody demands, and there's always hot coffee." We sat down and I told her, in pieces, what had happened. Not everything, not yet, but enough for her to understand that something inside me had shattered. Frankie listened without interrupting. Only once did she scowl, when I mentioned Michael's comment. Then she was silent for a few seconds. "You know what?" she finally said. "You were always stronger than you thought." I smiled, skeptical. "It doesn't seem like it. Because you were taught to be quiet, to sacrifice, to ask for nothing. But that's not strength, Eleanor. That's submission. And you can get out of there." I didn't answer, but those words planted a seed in my mind. I returned home before noon. Brenda looked up at me from the sofa as I entered, her brow furrowed. "Where were you?" "Out for a walk." "Without telling anyone?" Michael was worried. A lie. He hadn't even noticed I was gone. But I said nothing. I went up to my room, closed the door, and lay down. Lucy came in shortly after. "Grandma, are you okay?" "Yes, my love. Just a little tired." She snuggled up next to me, her warmth a comfort. She told me about a drawing she had made in class, of a woman with a cape flying over a city. "She's a hero." I named her Eleanor Blue. "After me?" "Of course, you're my hero." I didn't cry, but it was hard to swallow. That night, while everyone slept, I wrote another sentence in my notebook. I don't need permission to start over. The following days were different. I was the same. But something had changed. I no longer responded immediately when Brenda demanded something. I no longer rushed to set the table or wash the dishes as soon as they were done. It wasn't rebellion. It was dignity. Small acts of resistance that nobody noticed. At first, one Thursday afternoon, I went back to the coffee shop. Frankie was waiting for me with a tray of scones and 2 coffees. We sat on the patio. She told me about her travels, about how she decided to open the shop after her divorce. She did it with her savings and a small inheritance. She showed me old photos. We laughed a lot. I felt alive. "Why don't you come more often?" she said. "You could even help me with some recipes. I know you're a wonderful cook." Work here? I don't see it as work. I see it as taking back control. I went home with a mix of excitement and fear. That night, during dinner, I mentioned it casually. "I was at a friend's coffee shop today. She offered me a job helping in the kitchen." Michael didn't look up. Brenda did. "Work? At your age?" "Yes. Why not?" "Because you don't need to. You already have your Social Security. Besides, who will look after Lucy when we're not around? Lucy is 12 years old. She can get home from school by herself. And I need something for myself." Silence took over the table. No one supported me, but they didn't forbid it either. So I went back to the coffee shop. The first few days I felt clumsy, slow, out of place. But Frankie encouraged me. She taught me how to use the register, how to make coffee with the new espresso machine, how to arrange the display cases. She even let me decorate a corner with some old things I had stored at home. A pendulum clock, a set of teacups inherited from my mother, a vase with dried daisies. Customers started coming in, curious about that nostalgic little space. I served them with a smile. I felt useful, visible, valuable. One day, I met Omar. He walked in slowly, with a cane in hand and a polite smile. He ordered a tea with honey and sat down to read the newspaper. He came back every Thursday. Sometimes we talked about books, other times about politics. He told me he was a retired lawyer, intelligent, kind, always well-dressed. He liked to listen more than talk. He made me feel respected. One afternoon, as we were closing up, Frankie looked at me mischievously. "I think Omar likes you." I laughed nervously. "Don't be ridiculous." "Why not? You're a beautiful woman, Eleanor. You've lived, you've loved. Why couldn't you do it again?" I didn't know what to answer. I wasn't ready to think about that, but it was nice to hear. One Friday, when I got home, I found my things piled up in the living room. Clothes, books, a box of photographs, my sewing kit, everything out of my room. "What is this?" Brenda, with her arms crossed, answered without flinching. "We need the space. We're going to remodel and turn that room into an office. We've set up a spot for you in the laundry room. There's a cot." I was left breathless, not from the humiliation, but from the coldness. "And Michael?" "He agrees. He signed the papers, remember? The house isn't yours anymore." I didn't respond. I walked over, picked up one of my photos, me with Arthur and a little Michael, and hugged it to my chest. Then I went upstairs. I slept in the laundry room, but that night I wrote one last sentence in my notebook. "The day is coming when they will stop underestimating me." I barely slept that night. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop racing. The laundry room smelled of dampness and old detergent. Every noise in the house was amplified between the concrete walls. But more than that, what kept me awake was the memory. Not of what had happened that night, but of everything I had allowed before. I thought about the years I had cooked every dinner with care, the times I had looked after a sick Lucy, the nights I had gotten up without making a sound so as not to disturb anyone, every time I had accepted a sharp word without talking back. When exactly had I become an invisible presence in my own family? The next morning, I showered early and dressed as usual, in my favorite blouse and an embroidered scarf my mother had given me years ago. Brenda didn't even look at me when I left the house. Michael shut himself in his study, claiming an urgent video call. I didn't eat breakfast. I wasn't hungry. I walked to the coffee shop feeling a weight in my chest I couldn't shake. But as soon as I opened the door to Frankie's place and heard the little bell jingle, something inside me settled. Frankie noticed my expression immediately. "What happened now?" "They kicked me out of my room. I'm sleeping in the laundry room." She stopped cleaning the counter and stared at me, as if to make sure she'd heard right. "What do you mean? They kicked you out?" "They said they need the space. They're turning my room into an office. Frankie took off her apron with a sharp movement and came closer. You can't keep letting this happen, Eleanor. This isn't normal or fair or human. It's their house. Legally, I don't have any rights. Maybe. But morally, they have no right to treat you like this. We were quiet for a few seconds. Then she took my hand. There are ways to defend yourself. I know someone who could help you. He's a lawyer, a very good one. His name is Omar. Omar, the customer? Yes. He sometimes does consultations, even though he's retired. He doesn't charge. He does it because he believes in justice. I don't know, Frankie. I don't want to take it to that level. And what level do you think this is? Sleeping among rags and buckets? Seeing your things piled up like trash? I was speechless. She was right. Every day that passed, I convinced myself that I deserved the bare minimum, that I should be grateful for a roof over my head and a plate of food, even if it all came loaded with contempt. But that wasn't the life I wanted. Omar came by in the afternoon. Frankie had told him everything, and he, with that seemingly unbreakable serenity, sat down with me, a notepad in hand. The first thing you should know, he told me, is that even though you signed over the property, if you can prove you did it under pressure or without fully understanding the consequences, we could file a lawsuit to void the transfer due to undue influence. Also, there's legal precedent that recognizes the rights of seniors in vulnerable family situations. What does that mean in plain English? It means that if we can prove you suffered emotional manipulation or abuse, you could get your share back, or at least secure a decent living space in that house or some compensation. I looked at him in disbelief. And how do you prove something like that? With witnesses? With your notebook, for example. If you've been keeping a record of what's happened, that can help. And if Lucy is on your side, that too. I felt a knot in my stomach. I didn't want to drag my granddaughter into this, but I knew she was already in just by loving me. I thanked Omar and promised to think about it. That night, I went home determined to talk to Michael. I waited for Brenda to lock herself in their room and found him in the kitchen, pouring a glass of water. I need to talk to you. Not now, Mom. I'm tired. No, now. Because if I don't talk, I'm going to get sick. Michael turned and looked at me as if he didn't recognize me. What's wrong? Everything that's happening hurts me. It hurts that I gave up my house, my memories, everything I built, for you. And now I'm sleeping in a corner, like an intruder. It's not like that. Yes, it is, and you know it. I didn't ask for anything in return. I just wanted to be close, to be useful, to take care of Lucy. But you kicked me out of my room as if I didn't matter. Michael clenched his jaw. He said nothing. After a moment, he left without answering. The next day, I sat with Lucy in the backyard. She had a storybook, but she noticed I was distant. What's wrong, Grandma? I need to do something important, my love. And I might need your help. Her eyes lit up. Anything. Could you write down on a piece of paper how they treat me here? I know you've seen everything. She looked down. Is this for a lawsuit? Not necessarily, but I need proof to protect myself. Lucy nodded slowly. Then she hugged me. I don't want you to leave. I won't leave without a fight. Over the next few days, Omar and I began to work in silence. He taught me how to document every incident, how to speak without my voice trembling, how to look someone in the eye without looking away. Frankie supported me through it all. Flexible hours at the coffee shop, advice, and above all, companionship. I never felt alone in that process. One afternoon, coming home, I found my sewing kit thrown on the floor. Some needles broken, threads scattered, my scissors rusted. It was my most precious possession. I picked it up carefully. I went upstairs without a word. And that night, I knew the decision was made. The next day, I took all my papers to the coffee shop. Omar reviewed them carefully. Then he looked up. We're ready. Just tell me when you want to start the process. Now. Then get ready, Eleanor, because once you start, there's no going back. I looked at him firmly. I don't want to go back anymore. We filed the lawsuit on a Friday morning. Omar delivered it personally to the appropriate courthouse, and explained that we now had to wait for the formal notification to be served to Michael and Brenda. Despite the firm step we had taken, I returned home with a lump in my throat. I felt torn. On one hand, I was proud of taking that step. On the other, I was devastated by the idea of facing my own son in court. But there was no turning back. It wasn't revenge. It was dignity. The following days passed in a heavy silence. I said nothing, and neither did they. Brenda continued to walk through the house as if floating in her own world, organizing things, giving subtle orders to Lucy, and ignoring me completely. Michael avoided making eye contact with me. Only Lucy stayed close, sitting by my side each night with her books or just quietly holding my hand. One afternoon, while I was making tea in the kitchen, I heard the doorbell ring insistently. I went to open it. It was a process server from the court. Michael came downstairs upon hearing the voices and froze when he saw the man with the envelope in his hand. "Michael Coleman?" the server asked. "Yes. You've been served. You have a deadline to respond." He handed him the envelope, had him sign a receipt, and left. The silence that followed was like a crack running through the middle of the house. Brenda came down immediately, and seeing the envelope in Michael's hands, snatched it violently. "What is this?" Michael read in a low voice. His lips tightened. "It's from Mom. She's suing us." Brenda looked at me as if I had just spit in her face. "What kind of low-life move is this?" "A defense. I'm not going to stay quiet anymore." She laughed with contempt. "And what do you think you'll achieve? Kicking us out of the house?" "No, just getting back my right to live with dignity, to not be invisible, to not be treated like a piece of old furniture." "This is a betrayal," Michael suddenly shouted. "After everything we did for you. What did you do for me? Take away my room? Turn me into a burden? Use my social security check as if it were yours?" Lucy appeared behind them, unnoticed by anyone. She had heard everything. She slowly approached and stood by my side. "I support her, Dad." Michael looked at her, surprised. "What are you saying?" "Grandma doesn't deserve this. I've seen how you treat her. It's not fair." Brenda let out a disbelieving laugh. "Perfect. Now the little girl is turning against us, too." Michael looked down. He didn't answer. Brenda stormed up the stairs, and the bedroom door slammed shut. My son looked at me for a long time. There was no hatred in his eyes, but something worse. Shame. Was this necessary? "Yes," I answered calmly, "because I tried everything else before. I talked, I endured, I made myself small. But you didn't change, and I don't want to disappear anymore." Michael said nothing more. That night, the house was quieter than ever, as if something had broken and we all knew it couldn't be fixed. The following days were filled with constant tension. Brenda behaved like a stranger. She would brush past my shoulders forcefully, leave doors open so noise would reach the laundry room where I slept. She changed mealtimes. Sometimes they wouldn't serve me anything, but it didn't affect me in the same way anymore. I knew I had to write that down too, document it. Every offense became evidence. Omar accompanied me to the first hearings. Telling my story in front of strangers was both humiliating and liberating. I told everything. How I signed over the house out of love. How they pushed me aside. How I slowly lost my place. Lucy wrote a letter that was presented to the judge. Her words were so pure, so honest, that even the court clerk had to look away. My grandma has always been there for me. She took care of me when no one else could. I saw when they left her out, when they stopped talking to her, when they pretended she didn't exist. I don't understand why anyone would treat the person who gave us everything like that, Omar read in a steady voice. It was then that I understood my granddaughter had more courage than many adults. I smiled at her from the stand. She, sitting on the bench in the back, returned my gaze with shining eyes. Meanwhile, Frankie became my rock. She gave me strength when I wanted to falter. She reminded me who I was before all of this. One day she took me for a walk in a nearby park. She told me about her life, about traveling alone at 50, about the decisions that distanced her from her family, about the wounds and scars it took her time to heal. Freedom doesn't come all at once, Eleanor. It's built, and it hurts. But when you reach it, there's no going back. That sentence echoed in my head. One morning, we received a notice for a settlement conference. It was the last chance to reach an agreement without a final judgment. I went with a heavy heart. Omar explained that if Michael agreed, we could set a written agreement, a private room, free access to the common areas of the house, respect, and a proportional part of my check for my own use. We waited in the small room. They arrived late. Brenda walked in as if she were coming from a party. Michael, on the other hand, had sunken eyes. When the mediator explained the conditions, Brenda stood up indignantly. "This is blackmail. It's an agreement," Omar said, "and it's voluntary. No one is forcing you, but if you don't sign, we go to trial and the judge will decide." Michael swallowed hard. He looked at me. For a moment, I thought he would accept. But Brenda touched his arm. She whispered something to him, and he looked down. "We don't accept." The mediator nodded. Then the trial continues. We left in silence. That night, without a word, I packed a small box with some important items: photographs, old letters, a scarf my mother embroidered for me, and Lucy's letter. I hid it in a corner of the laundry room, wrapped in a plastic bag, as if it were a treasure, because it was, not for its material value, but because it represented what they could never take from me: my memory, my truth, my story, and now, my decision to never be silent again. The following weeks grew colder, denser, not because of the weather, but because of the atmosphere inside the house. Everything became silent, like a forced calm before an inevitable storm. I moved cautiously, as if every step might trigger a new explosion of shouts or sharp glares. Brenda seemed determined to show me I had no power over anything, and every day she found new ways to do it. She changed the lock on the hallway bathroom, so I could only use the one in the laundry room, which didn't even have hot water. She put latches on the pantry where they kept the basic food items. She would leave me stale bread, unsalted rice, and watered-down coffee. I didn't complain. I just wrote it all down. Omar had asked me to document every hostile act. I kept a notebook hidden among my books, where I recorded dates, words, actions. I was no longer a resigned victim. I was a quiet observer, patiently collecting evidence. Lucy, for her part, was becoming more rebellious. She started staying over at her friend Anna's house to avoid the arguments. She asked her father to let her sleep at Frankie's some nights. And although Michael allowed it at first, Brenda quickly put a stop to it. She said Frankie was filling my head with nonsense, and she didn't want her daughter influenced by a crazy old woman. Lucy stood up to her. I had never seen her shout like that. Brenda slapped her. I saw everything from the half-open door. I ran to my granddaughter, hugged her, and shielded her with my body as if she were still a helpless child. Brenda screamed at me not to interfere, that it was none of my business. Michael came down late. By the time he arrived, Lucy had already locked herself in her room, and I had a trembling hand on my chest. He said nothing, not a word, not a reproach, not a comfort. He just looked at Brenda like someone watching a fire, knowing it has already burned everything. The next day, Lucy didn't go to school. She stayed with me all day, sitting in the shade of the backyard, not saying much. I made her hot chocolate, the same way I did when she was little. She asked me if I had ever been happy. I told her yes, many times, although it had been a while since I remembered it. She smiled sadly. "I want you to be happy again, Grandma." "Maybe that's not for me anymore, honey." "Yes, it is. You just have to believe it." That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Lucy still believes in me. I have to start believing in myself again." A few days later, we received a notice from the court. The trial date had been set. Omar called to explain the details. Hearing that we had a formal court date made me tremble, not from fear, but from the certainty that what was at stake was much more than a house. It was my dignity, my place in the world. Michael and Brenda found out through the official mail. I didn't say a word, and neither did they. They locked themselves in their room and spent hours murmuring. That night, Brenda left the house without saying where she was going. Michael was left alone in the kitchen. I saw him sitting, his head in his hands, as if the weight of the universe had suddenly settled on him. I approached him, not out of pity, but out of necessity. "Are you okay?" I asked. He looked up. His eyes were red, as if he had been crying or hadn't slept in days. "I don't know how we got to this point, Mom." "Yes, you do, but you don't want to accept it. She told me you wanted to take the house from us." that you were going to put us on the street. And you believed her? I don't know. I sat across from him. The silence between us was heavier than any words. Michael, I don't want revenge. I don't want to ruin your life or Lucy's. I just want respect, peace, my own space, an old age without fear. But you were fine before. No, I was quiet before. There's a difference. He said nothing more. He just nodded, as if he finally understood something. Not everything, but something. He went to bed without looking at me again. The trial was approaching. Frankie took me shopping for clothes. She insisted I should present myself as confident, firm, like the woman I used to be. She did my hair, applied a little makeup. She gave me a blue scarf she had brought back from Morocco. She said it was for strength. That morning, looking at myself in the mirror, I saw someone different, more upright, more present, as if I was finally starting to recognize myself again. At the courthouse, Omar was waiting with his briefcase. He was impeccable, serene, with a way of speaking that inspired confidence. He gave me some last-minute instructions, and then we went in. Michael arrived alone. Brenda refused to attend. Lucy was with Frankie, who had taken her to the park. I didn't want her to see all of that. Inside the courtroom, the judge observed us attentively. He listened as Omar presented the facts. He presented documents, photographs, testimonies. We read Lucy's letter. The judge asked for a copy. His tone changed as he read it. He paused several times, as if the weight of each word was too much to continue without a break. Michael kept his head down. He said nothing. Only when it was his turn, he apologized. Not excuses, apologies. He acknowledged his silence, his emotional abandonment, his complicity by omission. My mother doesn't deserve to live like this. I failed as a son. I recognize that. The judge looked at him gravely. Are you willing to correct that? Michael nodded. The judge took a moment and then delivered his decision. I was to be reinstated in a private room with free access to common areas and full respect for my autonomy. And part of the control over my income was to be returned to me. A formal warning was also issued for Brenda, who was to refrain from any hostile action against me, or she could face criminal charges. I left the courthouse in silence. Omar walked me to the exit. Frankie and Lucy were waiting outside. My granddaughter ran to me and hugged me so tightly I felt all my bones align again. You won, Grandma. No, honey. I just got back what I should never have lost. That night, I returned home with my head held high. Michael met me at the door. He offered me a cup of tea. He didn't talk much, but his gestures were different. Brenda wasn't there. She had gone to her mother's house, outraged by the ruling. I didn't know if she would be back, nor did I care. I slept in the room that was once mine. Clean, tidy, with my things back in their place. I lit a candle, said a silent prayer, and for the first time in a long time, I fell asleep without fear. In the weeks following the trial, the house seemed to breathe differently. The air was no longer so heavy with tension, and although I couldn't say the calm was complete, the open war seemed to have ended. Brenda did not return immediately. According to Michael, she had taken some time to think, although I suspected her real goal was to pressure him emotionally. I didn't comment. My role was no longer that of a mediator, nor that of a silenced victim. It was that of a woman who had decided not to allow any more abuse, no matter who it came from. Michael began to show small signs of remorse. He would ask if I needed anything when he went out, if I wanted to go grocery shopping with him. He even cooked a couple of times, something he had never done before. I accepted cautiously. It wasn't resentment that made me keep my distance. It was the desire not to confuse kindness with redemption. Years of neglect weren't erased by a few nice gestures. Lucy, for her part, was closer than ever. She helped me organize my things. She spent afternoons with me, talking about everything and nothing. She asked me to tell her stories about when her father was a boy. And as I recounted the good memories, I was also rebuilding the broken parts of my own past. One afternoon, while we were drinking iced tea on the patio, she said something that stayed with me. I thought adults couldn't change, that if someone was selfish or cruel, they just stayed that way forever. But you changed, Grandma. You got stronger. Maybe I didn't change. Maybe I just went back to being who I was before I let myself be extinguished. Then I can change too, right? I took her hand. Her gaze had a depth I had never seen before. It was the look of a child beginning to understand the complexities of the world. I told her yes, that we could all change, but first, we had to have courage. She already had it. A week later, Brenda returned. She entered the house without a greeting, with her lips pressed tight and her eyes downcast. Michael hugged her as if nothing had happened. I didn't say a word. She walked past me as if I were invisible. In her mind, she still resisted the idea that I had won something. She was convinced her power was untouchable, but now everything had changed. Every time she tried to impose something, Michael would stop her. Not with force, but with a firmness he didn't have before. He would tell her that things had changed, that she had to respect the boundaries that the law and common decency had established. Brenda would look at him with contempt, but would hold her tongue. She knew that any misstep could turn against her. The tension returned to the house, though in a more subtle way. Brenda no longer shouted or confronted me directly, but she left little provocations. Dirty dishes on purpose when she knew I needed them. Abrupt channel changes when I was watching something on TV. Whispers on the phone in which I was clearly the subject. I noted everything down as Omar had taught me, not to report it, but as an exercise in clarity. Keeping a record helped me not to fall into doubt, into that emotional trap that had caught me so many times in the past. One night, I heard a loud argument between them. Brenda was yelling at Michael that he wasn't the same anymore, that he was letting a bitter old woman manipulate his life. He responded with a sentence I never thought I would hear him say. "She's not manipulating me. She's reminding me who I am." After that, there was a long silence. Then, firm footsteps and a door that slammed shut. The next day, Brenda had left again. I watched everything without intervening. It was as if the conflict no longer belonged to me. It was between them. I was on the sidelines, and that sideline was freedom. Omar called to see how I was. I told him the situation at home was tense but bearable. He asked if I had thought about moving out. I told him yes, many times, but I hadn't found the right place yet. He offered to help me look. He said he knew of a couple of senior living communities that weren't nursing homes, but active communities, with workshops, activities, and above all, independence. The very idea scared me at first, but then I started to think that maybe I deserved a space where I didn't have to measure every word, every step. That night, Lucy overheard me on the phone and asked, "Are you going to leave?" "I don't know yet." "What do you think?" "I think you should do what makes you happy. But if you leave, I want to come visit you every weekend." I hugged her. I was moved by her maturity, her loyalty. She was the reflection of everything I had tried to sow in this family. And although in many respects I had failed, in her, a seed had sprouted. Days later, I received an unexpected call. It was my younger sister, Laura. We hadn't spoken in years. She said she had heard what happened. She found out from a mutual friend who had seen the court ruling published in a legal bulletin. She asked if she could come visit. I accepted with reservations. We had unfinished business, old wounds that never quite closed. But something in her voice sounded genuine. Seeing her cross the threshold of the house, I felt a mix of emotions: nostalgia, distrust, tenderness. We spent the whole afternoon talking. She apologized for not being there for me. I confessed that I had also pulled away out of pride. Between tears and laughter, we remembered our childhood. Summers at our grandmother's house. The mischief with our cousins. It was a necessary reunion. It reminded me that, despite everything, I still had roots. I still had someone to count on. Laura offered to let me stay at her house for a few days, to take a break. I said I would think about it. When she left, I sat in the rocking chair on the patio. The sun was setting, and the sky had that shade between gold and orange that seemed to promise something. I didn't know what, but something. In that moment, I felt a deep certainty. I didn't have to stay where I wasn't welcome, not out of stubbornness or pride, but because I deserved something better. Sometimes, the bravest thing isn't to fight to stay, but to decide when to leave. And although I wasn't sure when that day would be, I knew it was approaching. As I went inside, I saw an old photo of Michael and Lucy in a dusty frame. I took it, cleaned it, and placed it carefully on the mantel. Then, I went to sleep, at peace. For the first time in many years, true peace. After Laura's visit, something inside me shifted. It was as if that conversation had swept away a layer of ancient dust that covered my memories. I began to understand that the problem wasn't just my relationship with Brenda, or even Michael's emotional neglect. It was something deeper. It was the habit of making myself small so as not to bother anyone, of staying silent to avoid conflict, of postponing my own desires to maintain a fragile family balance. I didn't want to live like that anymore. I had turned 66 carrying guilt that wasn't mine, accepting crumbs of affection as if they were feasts, waiting for recognition from those who only knew how to make demands. I wondered why it had taken me so long to wake up, but I also understood that sometimes you only see clearly once you've hit rock bottom. That clarity led me to a decision. I started looking for places where I could live on my own. I didn't want a luxurious or modern place, just somewhere I could have peace, dignity, and above all, freedom. I spoke with Omar. He sent me several options. I took my time looking at them. One in particular caught my eye. It was a small apartment complex called The Willows, designed for independent seniors, with gardens, a community library, and art workshops. It wasn't a retirement home. It was a living space, designed for people who, like me, still had much to do, to learn, to feel. The mere thought of myself there filled me with a mix of nerves and excitement. I told Lucy about it. She looked at me in silence, and then, with tears in her eyes, she hugged me. She told me she was proud of me, that she had always thought grandmothers were there to take care of others, but now she understood that they also deserved to take care of themselves. That night, I slept with a new kind of serenity. I no longer dreamed of the past. I dreamed of the future. Brenda came back a few days later, this time with a more restrained, almost neutral attitude. Maybe she had resigned herself to the new dynamic. She didn't try to argue with me or impose her presence. But she didn't get close either. It was as if I no longer existed in her world. She watched me with suspicion, as if she didn't understand what I was still doing there, so calm, so at peace. But it didn't matter to me. I was no longer afraid of her. Her contempt had lost its power over me. She was a powerless woman when she couldn't manipulate, and that was eating her up inside. Michael started to show interest in my decision to move. At first, he seemed confused, as if he didn't understand why I wanted to leave now that everything was calmer. I explained that it wasn't about running away, but about growing. That you can still grow at 66. That it wasn't abandonment, but a way of honoring my story, my wounds, my process. It was hard for him to accept, but he didn't stop me. He offered to help with the move. I politely declined. I wanted to do it my way. Around the same time, I received an invitation from the community center to attend a literary event. I decided to go. When I arrived, I was surprised to see so many women my age, sharing stories, readings, poems. I felt like part of something. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just Michael's mother or Lucy's grandmother. I was Eleanor, and that was enough. At the end of the event, one of the coordinators invited me to join an autobiographical writing workshop. I hesitated, but I accepted. Writing was something that had always appealed to me, though I'd never dared to do it. I sat in front of a blank page and began to write my other story, not with hatred or sadness, but with raw, painful truth. And as I wrote, I felt the words washing my soul clean. Each page was another step toward my liberation. One Saturday afternoon, while having tea with Lucy, I told her I had chosen the apartment where I wanted to live. I showed her the photos. Her eyes sparkled. "When are you moving?" she asked with a lump in her throat. "Soon. I want to organize everything calmly. Can I help you decorate your new house?" "Of course, my love. It'll be our project." That shared purpose was a balm. We started planning the colors for the curtains, the type of plants for the balcony, the pictures for the walls. We laughed as if we were building a magical castle. And in a way, we were. A few days later, I got an unexpected call from Frankie. She was in town for a doctor's appointment and wanted to see me. We met at a coffee shop. Seeing her, I got emotional. It was like reconnecting with a part of myself that had been suspended in time. She listened intently as I told her everything I had been through. She congratulated me on winning the lawsuit, on the decision to move, on the courage to break the cycle. She told me that many women live for decades trapped in oppressive family dynamics, that I was an exception. I didn't know what to say. I didn't feel special. I just felt fed up. But I understood her point. Most people stay quiet. I couldn't anymore. When I returned home, Brenda was waiting for me in the kitchen. She looked at me with a mix of defiance and annoyance. Without beating around the bush, she said, "So, you're leaving?" "Yes," I replied calmly. "Soon. And you plan on taking Lucy with you, I suppose?" "No. Lucy is your daughter. I'm only taking my freedom." She let out a dry laugh. She gave me a piercing look. "Don't think this makes you a better person. Abandoning your home is just another form of cowardice." I was silent for a few seconds. Then I looked at her, firmly. "I'm not leaving out of cowardice. I'm leaving because I finally understood that I don't have to stay where I'm not wanted. That's not weakness. It's dignity." She left without another word. I sat down to catch my breath. The scene didn't hurt me. It didn't anger me. It confirmed that I was doing the right thing. The next day, I started packing my things. Lucy helped me enthusiastically. We sorted books, photos, memories. There was a story in every object, but I no longer clung to them with sadness. It was a necessary letting go. A part of me was saying goodbye to this house not as a physical place, but as a symbol of what I had tolerated for too long. Michael would pass by occasionally, watching in silence. I could tell it was difficult for him, but also that he was being respectful. One night, seeing me organize my papers, he came over and said, "I know I wasn't the son you deserved. I don't want you to punish yourself, Michael. What matters is what you choose to do from now on. Will you forgive me?" "I don't have to forgive you. I just want you to be better. For yourself, for Lucy." We hugged. It was a short, awkward, but real gesture. Everything was ready. All that was left was to set the date. I sat down with my notebook and made a list of things I wanted to do in my new life. Learn to dance the tango, take painting classes, visit small towns, read all the books I had put off, dream. At my age, as if I were 20. Because the soul doesn't grow old when you nourish it. And then I understood that the end of one chapter wasn't a tragedy. It was an open door, a new story to be written. And this time, I would be the protagonist from the very first line. The morning I moved was gray, but not rainy. It was as if the sky was respecting my moment, accompanying me in silence. I woke up early. I hadn't slept much, not from anxiety, but from pent-up excitement. I dressed calmly. I made a coffee and walked for the last time through every corner of that house that had felt foreign for years, despite living inside it. Every wall seemed to whisper episodes that now dissolved like smoke. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a sense of closure, as if I were leaving a stage after playing a role for too long. Michael appeared at the dining room doorway, his eyes swollen. He said nothing. He just hugged me. I patted the back of his neck like I did when he was a child. We didn't need words. Lucy arrived shortly after, with a radiant smile. She carried a plant we had chosen together for my new balcony. It was a ficus, a deep green, strong, just how I wanted to feel. She carried it with pride as we got into the car that would take us to our new beginning. Brenda didn't say goodbye. I didn't see her that morning. I heard no footsteps, no doors, as if her silence was her final word, and I didn't need it. Her absence no longer hurt. It was part of the relief. The drive was short. Lucy talked nonstop, making plans for the next weekend. She wanted to have a sleepover, meet my new neighbors, decorate my reading nook. I listened with a full heart. That child had been my anchor in the storm. Thanks to her, I remembered who I was. We arrived at the complex mid-morning. The building had a modest entrance, flanked by blooming bougainvillea. The doorman greeted us kindly and handed me the keys. As I crossed the threshold of my new home, I took a deep breath. Everything smelled of fresh paint and possibilities. Light poured in through a large window, illuminating the space with a cozy warmth. Lucy ran to open the curtains and exclaimed that the balcony was perfect for our reading afternoons. We got to work. We hung the curtains, made the bed, placed the books on a shelf. It wasn't much, but it was enough. At lunchtime, we sat on the floor on a makeshift tablecloth and toasted with lemonade. She looked at me and said, "Grandma, this feels like a happy house." I told her that was because, finally, I was happy too. The following days were a dance of discovery. I met Clara, my next-door neighbor, a 72-year-old woman who taught watercolor at the community center. She invited me to her workshop. I went. My first brushstrokes were clumsy, but they made me laugh. It had been years since I had laughed like that. I signed up for a course on art history, another on meditation, and one on advanced writing. The hours filled up with activities that nourished me. I was in no hurry. I was not afraid. I felt myself expanding. Every time Lucy came to visit, we shared our stories like two friends catching up on life. She told me about her school, her doubts, her dreams, and I listened with my full attention. I wasn't the grandmother who only gave orders or advice. I was a woman who accompanied, who was learning to listen without judging, and she thanked me with her sincere affection. One afternoon, while walking in the park that surrounded the complex, I saw a woman sitting on a bench. She was crying silently. I approached without intruding. I offered her a tissue. She looked at me with surprise. She thanked me. We started talking. Her name was Dolores. She had recently lost her husband. She had no children. She told me she felt invisible, that no one listened to her. I told her about my own wounds, about how I had lived for so many years as a shadow in my own family. And for the first time in a long time, I saw reflected in another face the same pain I had carried in my own. From then on, we started meeting every week. We walked together, shared books. We cried without shame. Loneliness hurts less when it's shared. A month passed. I felt more alive than ever. One morning, I received an email from Michael. He invited me to lunch. I accepted. We met at a cafe near his work. He was nervous. You could see it in his eyes. He told me he had started therapy, that he needed to understand why he had allowed so much harm. He apologized again, this time with a different kind of humility. I believed him. He told me about Brenda, about how their relationship was deteriorating, about how he feared repeating patterns with Lucy. I told him the bravest thing he could do was to break them now, before he caused more hurt. We said goodbye with a long hug. I watched him walk toward his office, his shoulders a little less heavy. That night, I sat down to write in my notebook. I wrote down a sentence: "Love is not sacrifice, it is freedom." I repeated it to myself several times, like a mantra. It was my new compass. Days later, I had a visit from Frankie. She brought me a book she knew I would like. We sat on the balcony, between laughter and memories. She told me I looked different, more luminous. I told her about my workshops, my walks, my budding garden. She congratulated me. She hugged me tightly. I told her that without her help, I never would have gotten here. She replied that every step had been my own, that she had only reminded me that I had legs. That night, I slept deeply. One Sunday, Lucy proposed making a video for a school project on the bravest woman you know. She filmed me telling my story. I spoke naturally, without drama, just with truth. The video went viral among her classmates. Several grandmothers identified with it. They wrote me letters. One said, "Thank you for saying what so many of us keep silent." Another, "I thought it was too late to start over, but now I know it's not." I cried reading them, not from sadness, from hope. My story, with all its bruises, could serve to light the way for others. And that was a gift I never expected. The deepest change, however, was internal. I no longer felt guilty for choosing my peace. I no longer doubted if I had done the right thing. I no longer wondered if they would one day thank me. I did everything for myself. And that wasn't selfishness, it was justice. Every morning I looked in the mirror and recognized myself, not as the perfect mother or the ideal grandmother, but as a woman who survived her own story, who rewrote it, who made it her own, completely her own. One afternoon, I received a call from Lucy. She was crying. She said she'd had a big fight with her mother, that she felt misunderstood. I told her to come over. When she arrived, she threw herself into my arms. She asked to stay for a few days. I made up her bed with tenderness. As she fell asleep, I stroked her hair, and I thought, how wonderful it is to be a refuge, not out of obligation but out of love. How wonderful it is to offer shelter without losing yourself in the process. Then, I understood something more. That true freedom is not being alone, but being able to choose who you are with. And I, finally, could choose. The end didn't arrive with a loud bang or a dramatic blow. It was a whisper, a moment of clarity in the midst of everyday noise. I received an unexpected call one afternoon. It was Michael. His voice sounded softer, more human. He said he wanted to see me. He needed to talk to me honestly, without masks or reproaches. My heart raced, not from fear, but for the opportunity that was opening up. When he arrived, I greeted him with a mix of nostalgia and hope. We talked for hours. He confessed how hard it had been for him to understand the damage he had caused, not just to me, but to Lucy and to himself. He admitted that Brenda had been a toxic influence in his life, but he also took responsibility for his own actions. It wasn't an empty apology, but a commitment to change, to be a better father and a better son. I felt something in our relationship being reborn, something I thought was lost forever. That meeting didn't erase the past, but it opened a path toward forgiveness and reconciliation. It wasn't easy or quick. There were moments of doubt, of pain, but also of growth. Lucy began to trust her father again, and I found the strength within myself to let go of resentment and build a new story with them, without forgetting the wounds. Because healing isn't forgetting, but learning to live with the scars that make us who we are. Frankie continued to be my greatest support. Her friendship was a firm anchor on uncertain days and a celebration in moments of triumph. With her, I rediscovered the joy of sharing, of laughing without fear, and of dreaming without limits. Together, we planned a trip, a little getaway we had always postponed. It was an adventure that restored my faith in the world and in myself. We walked down streets I never imagined I would see. We breathed new air and immersed ourselves in cultures that taught me that life always has more to offer, no matter your age. Brenda disappeared from the horizon, at least from my present. I didn't need confrontations or revenge. Her silent departure was enough. In her place, a peace I never expected to find appeared. That peace that comes when you decide to leave behind what hurts you and make space for what nourishes you. I felt free from others' expectations, free from imposed guilt, free to simply be me. The garden I planted on my balcony grew vigorously. Every green leaf was a promise, every flower a celebration. I tended to it with dedication, and sometimes Lucy and I would sit there to read, to dream, to plan futures that once seemed impossible. That connection to the earth taught me that life is a constant cycle of planting, waiting, and blooming, that you can be reborn as many times as necessary. My social security check, which was once a reason for scorn, became a symbol of independence. With it, I learned to manage my finances, to plan my expenses, to run my life with autonomy. I didn't depend on anyone else to survive, to decide, to live. That gave me a dignity that no insult or contempt could ever take away. The day Lucy came home with a medal from an art competition, her eyes shone brighter than ever. She told me that everything she had learned with me had inspired her to be brave, to follow her passions without fear of making mistakes. That declaration was the greatest prize I could ever receive. My legacy wasn't material possessions or invisible sacrifices, but sincere love and the lesson that you can always start over. I finally understood that the greatest gift I gave myself was allowing myself to be happy unconditionally, without apologies, happy in my own way, on my own time, and with my own decisions. That happiness was my silent revenge against those who doubted me. I didn't need to prove anything to them. My life spoke for itself. And so, in this new chapter, I built a home that was truly mine, a space where laughter replaced tears, where light conquered shadows, where love manifested in simple but powerful ways. A home that didn't depend on deeds or possessions, but on the inner peace I had cultivated with so much effort. And as I write these words, I know my story is not unique or perfect, but it is real. It is the story of a woman who found her voice when many thought it was too late, who decided she deserved respect, affection, and dignity, who learned to love herself without conditions and to let go of what did not help her grow. Because, in the end, it is not the check, nor the house, nor the years that define a person. It is the ability to reinvent oneself, to get up again and again, to keep going with an open heart, ready to receive the best that life has to offer. That, no one can ever take away from me.